Ladies and gentlemen, I still remain Dr. Bello Mohammed Magaji, an associate professor of law in the School of Law of the American University here in Yola, Adamawa State, Northeast Nigeria. In continuation of my law lecture series on the law of banking, today we shall be looking at the basic principles of banking law. The basic principles of banking law. As I mentioned earlier, banking law is a branch of commercial law that governs the legal framework within which banks operate. It is essential that the students know, or the students who want to pursue a career in the banking industry, to have a good understanding of the basic principles of banking law. This lecture note aims to provide an overview of the basic principles of banking law for the students and all other persons that are interested in banking law. Now, the basic principles include prudence. Number one is what? Prudence. What is prudence? The principle of prudence requires banks to conduct their operations in a careful and cautious manner. This means that banks must carefully assess the risk associated with their operations and take appropriate measures to mitigate those risks. Banks are also required to maintain adequate capital and reserves to absorb potential losses. The second principle of banking law is confidentiality. The principle of confidentiality requires banks to keep information of their customers confidential. This means that banks must not disclose any information about their customers' accounts or transactions to any third party without the consent of the customer, except where required by law. Another principle of banking law is good faith. The principle of good faith requires banks to act in the best interest of their customers and to deal with them honestly and fairly. This means that banks must not engage in any fraudulent or deceptive practices, and they must disclose all material information to their customers. The next principle is due diligence. The principle of due diligence requires banks to exercise due care and diligence in the conduct of their operations. This means that banks must verify the identity of their customers, conduct appropriate background checks, and monitor their transactions for any suspicious activities. The next principle is compliance. Compliance. The principle of compliance requires banks to comply with all applicable laws and regulations. This means that banks must maintain appropriate records, report suspicious activities to relevant authorities, and implement appropriate anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing measures. In conclusion, the basic principles of banking law govern the legal framework within which banks operate. These principles include the principles of prudence, confidentiality, good faith, due diligence, and compliance. It is essential for Nigerian students who want to pursue a career in the banking industry to have a good understanding of these principles to ensure that they comply with the legal and regulatory framework within which banks operate. Thank you very much, and that brings us to the end of that topic.